A recent poll showed that lobbyists were trailing chlamydia, gonorrhea, and Al-Qaeda in public approval polls. I believe we were around 7%. Some might say we're down to friends and family.
One of the earliest rules I learned in playing golf is it's okay to be a bad golfer, just don't be a bad slow golfer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Golf and Politics. Today we have somebody who's been on our show before, but not as an actual guest. He was on for his expertise to talk about the 2024 election, but today he's on as a guest. We're going to get to know him better. He's somebody I've gotten to know over the last few months, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Rob, you're the one that's introduced me to Brad. He is your business partner. Why don't you go ahead and introduce Brad to our listeners?
Great. Welcome, Brad. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Brad and I have been business partners at Majority Group for, I think, coming up on 6 years, maybe a little longer, maybe 7. And we are now both figuring out life back in the minority, even though the company's called the Majority Group. So we're leaning on our Republicans in these first couple wayward months for America. But Brad is an expert in politics. He worked on Capitol Hill around the same time I did. He was chief of staff to a congressman from California. He was deputy to Hillary Clinton when she was a U.S. senator. He was one of the top Democratic lobbyists for the Mortgage Bankers Association here in Washington, D.C., and is a veteran of all things campaign, active in fundraising and grassroots and you name it, messaging, every part of the campaign structure. He's also a 13.7 handicap. I think that went up a little bit during the last trip to Streamsong. But I can't say enough good things about Brad. Very smart, very a loyal friend, a great business partner, and loves the game of golf as well. So with that, Brad Cheney.
Thanks for having me.
Brad, thanks for coming on. And I think one thing we have in common is our handicaps both went up after the most recent trip to Streamsong that we were on together. And I probably scared you a few times with some of the shanks that I had, especially on the first day there. I think I've got it worked out now, but we'll keep practicing. But the first question I
was going to say is, as Rob said, he can't say enough good things. The one bad thing he said is I do have a knack for aiming golf balls at him on the golf course occasionally.
He almost killed me, as you remember, in Critch Island and in Ireland. I can, now that you bring it up, I can still hear the ball whizzing by my head in the fairway, and just thinking.
I yelled for.
Yeah, but what's not as fast as the ball got past me.
We had a situation at Streamsong where I was struggling so mightily. I finally hit one really solid, but I missed the green by about 50 yards to the left. And Brad was standing there right next to me, and I said, "Well, Brad, I was playing for the shank." So that's how bad it was at one point in time. But hey, Brad, what inspired you to get into politics? And then how did this come to be that you got into partnership with Rob? Rob talked about that in his intro. I mean, you had a very extensive career with the Mortgage Bankers. So how did you get involved to begin with out of college? What inspired you to be in politics, and what inspires you today to work with Rob at Majority Group?
Well, sure. That's a great question. I grew up not in the Ohio Valley like the two of you and a lot of your guests, but I grew up in Montpelier, Vermont, which is the smallest state capital in the country. And we truly have a citizen legislature. Parents of my friends were in the state legislature. My chemistry teacher in high school was a state senator, who would be gone for a couple months in January when the legislature was in session, and then he'd come back and teach us. So I was around politics from an early age and was exposed to it. My oldest brother, who has cerebral palsy, is in a wheelchair, he actually for a period of time sold the daily newspaper in Montpelier at the time was an afternoon paper. And so he would sell the Times-Argus in the state capitol in the afternoons. And so when I was in middle school, after I got out from school, I actually would go to the state capitol and sell the newspaper with him in the state capitol. And at that period of time, you could just walk in and he'd be among the legislators and you're selling the Times-Argus for 25 cents a piece. It was just a great experience to be around politics in that way. Vermont, I know everybody likes to think Vermont is this, bastion of liberal politics. It actually was not for a long period of time. And the period when I was growing up was when it was transitioning. Little known fact that when Bill Clinton won the Vermont presidential election in 1992, he was the first Democrat since LBJ in 1964 to win Vermont, and only the second in history. 1936, FDR only lost 2 states. One of them was the state of Vermont. That tells you just sort of how conservative the state was for a really long period of time. Pat Leahy, who I interned for, my first Capitol Hill internship, loved to say that he was the only Democrat to get elected to the Senate in Vermont. In part because Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat.
That is true.
Yeah. So I came from a family that was very service oriented. My father is a retired Methodist minister. My mother is a retired school teacher. She taught special education in elementary schools all over the state. So from a young age, sort of being involved was something that was very important to my parents. And so that kind of inspired me to get interested in politics as well as living in it in Montpelier. And then I saw growing up the impact that the positive impact that government can have on people's lives with my own brother. As I said, he had cerebral palsy, was in a wheelchair his entire life. He gets support from Medicare. He's gets disability payments from Social Security. He lives in an assisted living facility, but has his own apartment with support that he gets from home health coming in and government support that he gets in terms of subsidizing his apartment. All of those things, if the government didn't have those programs, would have had a much different impact on his life and my parents' lives. And so I think from an early age, I learned the positive impact that the government can play in people's lives, and that inspired me to want to have a career in politics. And so when I was looking at colleges, I looked at a bunch of different schools, Pennsylvania, Ohio, talked to them about, hey, I want to do a semester abroad and I want to do a semester in DC. And all of the admissions counselors were like, well, it's great that you want to do that. You probably aren't going to want to spend 25% of your college career not on campus. And so I was driving back home and it sort of dawned on me, why do I want to spend only one semester in DC? Why don't I just spend 4 years in DC? And so similar to Rob and how he ended up at Georgetown, I went to American University in DC. And AU is really great in terms of the political science department in pushing students out into the DC community. They set up the schedule so that you can do internships all the time. And so I really interned every semester of my college career, except I think first semester freshman year. I interned on Capitol Hill for Senator Leahy, interned at the White House, interned at a federal agency, interned for John Kerry's Political Action Committee. I did all of those different things to get out there and get experience while I still was in school. So that's sort of how I ended up in DC and having this career. And then as Rob said, he and I were chiefs of staff at the same time on the Hill for 2 members of the Financial Services Committee. I assume our paths probably crossed at some point when you were Walt's chief and I was Brad's chief. I first really remember interacting with Rob when I had left Sherman's office. I was working for MBA during Dodd-Frank, and Rob's boss played active role in a number of different issues involved in Dodd-Frank when I was going through the House. And so that's where I first remember interacting with him. I first remember seeing Rob on a golf course at I don't even know what it was. Some big scramble tournament at PB Dye out in Maryland, and being like, oh, I didn't know Rob played golf. And then whoever you're with, there were a bunch of single digit handicaps and you won by like 6 strokes. I remember that specifically. Sounds about right. Rob actually pitched me for business when I was at MBA after he had started Majority Group. And he learned an important lesson, which is that your friends aren't always the people who control the spending budgets. And my boss was the one who picked our consultants, not me. So I said, hey, it's a great lunch, and I'd love to hire you, but I don't have any influence over that. And so I was at MBA for 8 years. It was a great experience. I decided I wanted to try multi-client and went to a different firm that, for a number of different reasons, after a year or so, it just wasn't the right fit. Was trying to figure out what my next move was, and started talking to people. And I sat down with Rob, and we had conversations over, several months. And then at the end of 2019, we said, hey, let's try this out. And that was hard to believe, but 5 years, going on 6 years ago. And it's been, one of the best moves I've made in my professional career.
So, Brad, a lot of people that have been around DC a long time have advice for young people that are coming here for the first time, which all three of us have been in those shoes. Some of the advice that comes to mind, Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. President George W. Bush said that whatever your weaknesses are, your opponents in Washington will exploit them, and whatever your strengths are, you're going to need them. And Michelle Obama said that when you obtain power, it doesn't, change who you are, it reveals who you are. So what is the Brad Cheney advice on Washington and moving up the ladder and wielding influence in whatever you're doing?
So the advice that I got when I was, 22 years old was, when you are young, go work on a campaign or multiple campaigns. But one, it's a lot harder to do when you get older and you've got kids. But two, at the end of the day, if you're involved in politics, you have to win elections. And so you need to understand how elections work and how your bosses, if you're working on the Hill, how they got to where they are. And so the other thing I think is great about campaigns is that it gives you, one, if you work hard, and do what you're told, you move up quickly. You can get a lot, campaigns are run by young people, and if somebody's good, you're going to get more responsibility. It's just the nature of it. And then the other part of working in campaigns is you never know who you're going to run into and who you're going to make relationships with. And frankly, after I graduated from college in 2002, moved to Manchester, New Hampshire with my girlfriend, who's my now wife, and we worked on Jean Shaheen's Senate race in 2002. She was running first against Bob Smith, who lost in the primary to John Sununu, and she lost that race. But the people that I met are people that I'm still in contact with today. I shared a desk with Chris Pappas, who's now a congressman from New Hampshire. He and I literally sat 6 feet apart from each other for 6 months. And the person that came up to do our election protection work happened to be best friends with Hillary Clinton's press secretary. And so when I moved back to D.C. after that campaign and sort of sent out the emails that we all send saying, hey, I'm back in D.C., here's my resume, do you know a job? It just so happened that Hillary needed someone to be the assistant to the chief of staff and to be the assistant administrator. Jeremy really liked me and passed on the resume, and the rest is history. You never know those connections that you're going to make. But I think it's really important, if you want to be involved in politics, to go and work on a campaign, at least one, just so you understand what it is that, how we drive the system.
Brad, that is tremendous advice, and I agree with every single word that you said. And I feel like, Rob, you're 3 or 4 years younger. I guess you're 3 years younger than me, 4 years younger than Brad. So genuinely, though, we're about the same age. And I'm going to sound like an old fuddy-duddy at this point, but I feel like something died with our generation, and this new generation coming up isn't taking that advice like they should. There's not a lot of people running out and volunteering. I'm sure some of your first gigs, you were getting paid next to nothing, but you were thrilled to be doing it, right? I mean, you're in the
$18,000
process, right? I mean, my
Yeah.
my internship at the White House was unpaid. When I went to work for Bob Ney, I was getting paid. My salary was 19 grand. I
Yep.
could barely afford to split a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 other guys. That's where it was. But I thought I was on top of the world. I had arrived in Washington, D.C., and I'm working for a member of Congress, and I'm talking to him every day, and I'm learning so much. And I just knew the future was so bright, and I was excited to come to work every day. And what is it about maybe some in the younger generation that they're expecting to make so much money working in politics right off the bat?
I don't know if I have a good answer to that. I think that, I mean, listen, I think there's this sort of talk about, millennials and sort of the younger generation wanting to basically be you know, the supervisors at the top of the ladder when they walk in the door. And I'm not sure, there's probably been a lot of books written on that. Um, I also know a lot of young people, I've come across even in Virginia who do get out there and are working on the campaigns. So, um, I think it's as a manager, Rob and I have seen this, that sometimes you hire an intern and they want to be the ones, leading the account. And you're like, hang on a second, like you got to walk before you run. And you saw that, I think, when 10 years ago, or when I was hiring in Sherman's office, where you're like, people come in and they want to be the senior policy advisor to the congressman. I'm like, you got to answer the phones first, and you got to respond to the mail. And that, I think, is a challenge.
It could be too. I could just be jaded. I mean, I was in a group of people, like everybody, all of us that were interning at the White House, were in the same boat, and we were thrilled to be there. And the people that I worked on campaigns and traveled the country to do stuff with, working on campaigns, we're all in that same boat. So it could have existed that there was people that, thought the same way when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And I
Yeah.
just didn't know who they were because I only surrounded myself with those. I just have found it a bit challenging to find good volunteers and interns sometimes on bigger campaigns.
Yeah, I think I think that's the case. And just be a reflection on this generation. Rob, you were starting to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Matt and I were sharing a James Carville video with each other after the campaign about, you know, disgruntled younger staffers, and everyone second guesses when you come up short. But, I'm sure I'm guessing you share this assessment, but whether you're running a campaign or a congressional office, like, there's a constituency of one. It's the member of Congress, and the chief of staff's job is to protect them. The campaign manager's job is to protect them. And we're not running this by a committee. I don't really need to know what a 19-year-old intern thinks about it. Now, there are times when you're young where you get a chance to participate in a free flowing of ideas. Maybe some of your ideas would be incorporated. It's good for the congressman or the candidate to hear a wide array of opinions. But I think what a lot of young people, and typically the people that get involved in politics, are type A, hard charging people. It's hard for them to accept that they're not the star in the West Wing. They're not the star in a made for TV movie, that, you're part of an operation that's all working in the same direction. And I don't think that's anything new. I mean, I think that, you know, there's always going to be the current generation that looks back at the next generation that comes up and says, oh, they're not as tough as we were. They're not as smart as we were. The world's going to hell. You know, I think that this younger crew is very smart. I think they're empathetic. I think they have, you know, a lot of good intentions and want to do something meaningful and purposeful. But I guess I would just second both of your assessments that, you know what, I might need you to go stave the field on the mall for the softball game.
Softball game.
You
Yeah.
might have to go pick up the congressman's uh, dry cleaning, or get the coffee started. Like, I think there's some of that. There's a little bit more entitlement that we're in, and if you before you can save the world, you need to be able to make a pot of coffee. Um, and I don't know. I mean, what is your experience? I know we have a lot of young interns that come through every year. What's been your experience with the interns over the years?
I mean, I think it depends. I mean, I'm not blanking on his name, but the intern that we had last year from Ohio, who was whatever, the chair of the Young Democrats for Ohio, I thought was very impressive, and clearly had
Patrick.
worked. Yeah, Patrick, right? had worked very, very hard and was clearly trying to get all the experience he possibly could. I'm also, in some ways, I'm grateful is maybe not the right term, but like I'm happy that that first campaign that I worked on in 2002, it was a good experience that we lost, in that it taught me the lesson that you're not going to win every race, and some races just aren't winnable. I think that in 2002, then Governor Shaheen, she's now senator, but she ran a really, really good race. It was less than, it was a year after 9/11. We were in a position where it was going to be really, really hard for a Democrat to win that race. And it taught me that sometimes there's just bigger things that are out of your control that you can't overcome. And that was a good experience. I had a friend of mine in politics who, I think it was probably like 2012, said, don't bring me a resume for someone whose the only campaign experience was the '08 Obama campaign, because it doesn't get any better than that,
Yeah.
and you need to, losing toughens you up, and
Sure.
you learn, frankly, you learn more from losing than you do from winning a lot of times.
I would say this, I mean, the best campaign that I've ever been involved with, where we did our best work, was a race that we lost. We lost by 278 votes out of 300,000.
Yep.
I mean, razor thin. But the fact that it was even that close, if people only knew what all went on behind the scenes to get it that close, and how
Right.
everything came together, it was very impressive. And it's like, it doesn't get better than that, except if we could have gotten 140 people to switch their votes. So that's good advice. I think that's really important, that people go through the fire, and are tested. And speaking of that, let's talk about another losing race. 2008, you were involved at a high level in the Hillary Clinton campaign. She was the clear front runner. And I don't think there was anybody that believed a freshman senator from Illinois was going to catapult all the way to the presidency. What was the moment when you're working on that campaign where you realize, oh my God, I mean, I don't think Hillary's going to win this race?
Good question. So I would say, listen, the easy answer would be the Iowa caucuses when Obama won and Senator Clinton finished third. But I think actually I can think of two specific instances where I sort of was like, oh, this may not go like I think it was going to. One was, so I worked in Hillary's office in 2006. I went to a Democratic, lobbying and public affairs firm, helped out with the campaign. And then I was in New Hampshire on primary night. That picture over my left shoulder is my wife and I in Manchester the night that Hillary won the 2008 primary in New Hampshire. That's at the party in Manchester. And I came back to DC and I was like, I can't do what I'm doing for the clients anymore, and sort of be back and forth. Like, I thought at the time, this might be the only chance I have where my boss is actually going to be someone I know personally is going to be running for president. So I left and went to work on Virginia. And the way the primary calendar was set up, this was early January. Super Tuesday was the first Tuesday in February. And there was, I can't remember, but a ton of states were voting on Super Tuesday. Week after Super Tuesday was what they called the Mid-Atlantic primary. Maryland, DC, and Virginia all were voting the week after. So I got to ask, hey, will you help with Virginia? Yes. So I got to the headquarters. I discovered that I was the first person working full-time on Virginia in the headquarters a month before the primary. And the other two people was the deputy campaign manager, who's Mike Henry, who's now Tim Kaine's chief of staff, and he was like Mr. Virginia, but he was the deputy campaign manager for the entire campaign. So he got a lot of things on his plate. And then this woman who was the head of our congressional affairs department also was like doing some stuff in Virginia. So that tells you that like a month before the first primaries after Super Tuesday, there was no infrastructure for after Super Tuesday. And the campaign leadership, I think their plan was basically, we're gonna sweep all those four first caucuses and primaries. We're gonna sweep on Super Tuesday, and the primary's gonna be over. And I was like, they better be right, because otherwise we're screwed. Turns out we were screwed. I think the other thing was on Super Tuesday night, in that Hillary won more primaries on Super Tuesday. She won more states with primaries on Super Tuesday. She won the popular, basically the total vote count on Super Tuesday. And she came out of it with less delegates than Barack Obama. And that was because the Obama campaign understood what the goal was. The goal wasn't to win more votes. The goal was to win more delegates. And they were masters in the rules of the Democratic primary process and how delegates are allocated. And it's a really complicated formula in each state. It's not just who wins the popular vote. It's not winner take all like the Republican presidential primaries are. It's proportional representation, but only if you get about 15% of the vote. And then some are awarded on a statewide basis. Some delegates are awarded on a congressional district basis. And the Obama campaign was really, really smart about figuring out, okay, Hillary's going to spend all of her time. Our campaign spent a lot of time on urban areas where all the Democrats were. We might win in what congressional district in an urban area. They might have won 55 to 45. But because of the rules, they might only get one extra delegate out of that congressional district because they had to get above 60 to get more delegates. The Obama campaign would go to a rural district and they would net 3 delegates out of that because they spent a lot more time and they put their resources in there. They were really, really smart in terms of how they allocated their resources and the candidates' time. And they realized that once they got a lead in the pledged delegate count, it's really hard to catch up once the field narrows down to only 2 candidates. So they understood what the real goal was, and they used it to their advantage, and they organized to that advantage. And after Super Tuesday, I was like, this is going to be really hard to do.
That's really insightful, Brad. I mean, I think that's incredible analysis. My question now is, do you think that Hillary learned a lot from that process in 2008 and then was able to do a much better job winning delegates in 2016 against Bernie?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, she won the primary, and I think that in 2016, I think that 08 was a different race, and once Obama caught fire, it was one of those things that, there's a saying that someone's support is a mile wide and an inch deep. I think that was often the case with Senator Clinton, was that there were a lot of people that were supporting her because they thought she was the inevitable candidate. And once that sort of the veil of inevitability was pierced, it became a much different race. And, President Obama really capitalized on that. 16 was a slog. That was, from the beginning, it was an anti-incumbent year, really. That's why Donald Trump won. That's why Bernie Sanders did so well, was that she was again sort of the inevitable candidate. She was the heir apparent. Obama clearly wanted her to be the nominee, and it just, when she didn't wrap it up quickly, it just became sort of this slog that went on for months.
I want to know.
Hard.
I want to know if were any embarrassing personal moments for every staffer on every campaign has some inevitable screw up with the candidate or the candidate's family. I want to know if you might be able to offer some personal tales from the trail from Bradford Cheney.
Are we talking about from the campaign or just my career in general? Because I certainly, have them from my career in general.
Yeah, let's hear some good ones.
All right. So I'll give you 3. When I interned for Senator Leahy, again, Vermont's a small state, so we only had 3 interns in the Senate office. I think when I did it, every intern got the opportunity to shadow the senator for a day. We got to follow him wherever he was in D.C. And so on my assigned day, I went to Judiciary Committee markup with him and hearing and sat behind the dais. And then at some point we went over to the Capitol because there was a series of votes. And so first off, I'm walking behind him in whatever the anteroom is behind the rostrum off the Senate floor. and I think I stepped on his feet, the back of his foot 3 times. He luckily didn't say anything. So then, we're on
You
the
took the shadowing very seriously then. I mean, you were right there.
that is exactly what his chief of staff said, to the word. So then I'm on the Senate floor, and this was fall of '99, so like all these giants of the Senate are there. It's Ted Kennedy. There's John McCain, and I'm trying to remember the other, but it was amazing. It's the first time I'd ever been on the Senate floor. So then we walk out, and it was this beautiful day. I think it was in May, and the senator said he was with the chief counsel on the Judiciary Committee. He said, "Hey, it's nice. We're just going to walk back over to the Capitol." So we walk off the Senate floor. There's a bank of elevators, and then you go out, and there's a revolving door that goes down the east front of the Capitol across from the Supreme Court. So I've never been here before, and so I'm walking along behind him, and I don't realize that it's a revolving door in front of me. I thought it was just a regular door, and so I just walk into, as he starts to push the revolving door, I realize, oh shit, this is a revolving door. But by the time I realized it, the door had closed behind me. And so now he and I are basically in the little tiny revolving door, and he's over 6 feet tall. I'm not a small guy. That's a small space. And I'm literally shuffling my feet, trying not to kick him or touch him in this revolving door. And to his credit, he never said a word to me, but the chief counsel behind was literally just sitting there. I turn, he's just shaking his head. He's like, what is wrong with this kid?
Guarantee he made fun of you to the chief of staff behind your back that night.
Oh yeah, they made me, when at my going away party, they made me tell the story. So
that's great.
The second one was one of my jobs when I was in the Senate office was, these groups would come to DC. I'm sure you guys have all had them, and they want to give some award to the senator or the member of Congress. And so I often be the one to arrange it. And so at some point, some group from upstate New York was giving Senator Clinton an award, and we had to move it over because of votes. We were on we're doing pictures and on one of the stairways outside the Senate floor. And they gave her this glass award that was sort of tablet on the top, and then it was sitting on a glass base. And so, they give her the award. She takes the picture. She turns to hand me the award, and she's holding it by the base. And I think that the top is attached to the base. So I just grabbed it from the top to discover that it's actually not attached to it. And this 6-inch long, 1-inch thick glass base just falls right onto that ornate floor, right off the Senate floor, and shatters into thousands of pieces, just all over the place in front of Senator Clinton and this group. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I cannot believe this.
So you've proven that you are incapable of walking, opening the door, or holding an award.
And somehow you still have made it all these years in the industry.
Somehow I still have made it. But I would say this, to Senator Clinton's credit, she made it sort of we just made some joke of oh, that wasn't what was supposed to happen or something like that. And I quickly we dealt with the situation. I got back to the office, and there was this woman who I always gave this stuff to. She called the manufacturer. The manufacturer said, we'll send you another base, and got it dealt with. And when I saw her later in the day, she said to me, hey, what are we doing about the base for that award? And I said, we called the manufacturer. They're going to ship us a new one. It'll be here at the end of the week. She's like, good answer. Maybe in the future we hold things from the bottom, not the top.
Didn't that happen to a golfer at a major championship?
Oh,
maybe Colin Morikawa with the Wanamaker Trophy or something. He was shaking around and fell off. And
yeah, I think so.
All right, and then one more good one.
Okay, so the third one was from when I was interning at the White House. I interned in the social office at the White House, which was amazing because this was pre 9/11. I think maybe they've changed the rules then. The social office runs every event on White House grounds. And the interns basically work all the events. So I got to attend this, volunteer, but attended state dinners, attended welcoming ceremonies for, heads of state on the South Lawn. And so I remember TNT used to do this holidays from the White House concert, and it used to be in a tent that was down on the South Lawn, and it was raining that night, and so they had arranged for the trolleys that they do tours around DC. They had hired the trolleys to basically take people from the South Portico down to the tent. And so my job was basically coordinating the trolleys and loading the guests on and taking them down. And so it's raining, so I have an umbrella, and we've gotten all the guests down there. And then at some point I'm kind of in between, but I see that someone has walked out from the South Portico. So I'm like waving a trolley up to do it. At the same time as I'm walking up, and I can't really tell who it is until I'm getting close. And it's Chelsea Clinton. She was going down. She's in full ball gown. And so as I open up my big golf umbrella, a gust of wind comes behind me and flips the umbrella around at about the distance of 3 feet from Chelsea. And it just sprays her and like soaks her in water all over the place. And it's like 40 degrees out and rainy. And she's like sort of screamed, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she's like, it's okay, I'll be fine. And like gets on the trolley and drives off. And I was like, I'm dead. Like, I'm gonna get fired. So
Matt, just imagine how good staffer Brad's response to Elon Musk would have been of like, what were your 5 wins?
Oh, there's some good ones, Brad.
Yep. There. Yeah.
Changing gears just a little bit. You spent all these years lobbying now. I think, 15 plus years you've been a lobbyist.
Yeah.
And the term lobbyist gets a bad rap from many people. For instance, a common political attack would be to, call out a candidate saying he's received X amount of dollars or X percentage of his money's come from dirty lobbyists or swamp creatures. I'm sure there's a lot of flack that people will give you for being a lobbyist or representing special interest. There are even politicians, both sides of the aisle, that refuse to take campaign contributions from special interest or lobbyists. I don't think that that's necessarily good for our democratic republic that we have that. So that kind of bias towards lobbyists, I guess, is what I'm getting at. So I'd like you to just kind of tell our audience why lobbying is a noble profession. Why is it important to our form of government and in free speech and just representing the interests of people around the country? I think a lot of people don't even understand what a lobbyist really does, and I'd love for you to maybe shed a little light on that.
Sure. Well, listen, everybody loves the First Amendment, but I think a lot of people don't get past the freedom of religion and the right to free speech to realize that the last clause of the First Amendment is the right to petition your government. So I like to think that my profession is constitutionally protected. I think that people have the misconception that lobbyists operate like the movie Thank You for Smoking. And those might have been the good old days that maybe Wayne Ballas and Marty Russo operated in. Those are not the lobbying world of today, really. I view our job as, we're a conduit of information between our clients and members of Congress, and we help people to navigate through the quote unquote swamp. The reality is, and I think you guys have talked about
Wait, did you just call Capitol Hill the swamp? I just want to make
I
sure we have that on record.
Well, yes, but I used my quotes.
quotes.
He was kind of,
Yes.
He was mocking it. Don't worry.
All right.
Yes. So everybody who's listening on Apple Podcasts, I said swamp in quotation marks. YouTube viewers will see that. The reality is that, and you guys have talked about this on your podcast previously, members of Congress and their staff deal with far too many issues to be experts in all of them. And they need outside sources of information to understand how the issues that they're facing are going to impact the American people and businesses and industry and interest groups. And so what I think we do for our clients is help put them into conversations with the right people who are making decisions that are going to impact them, and explain to them, hey, like, if you do an X, Y, and Z, this is what the impact is going to be on, American home buyers, American consumers, And the same way we explain to our clients, hey, Congress is looking to do X, Y, and Z. This is how it's going to impact your business. And so that's a lot of what we're doing, is helping people understand who are the right people to talk to. And then we're helping them craft a message that is salient to members of Congress. You know, Tip O'Neill said all politics are local. That's really the case. Like, one of the things that I always push with my clients when we're talking to members of Congress and their staff is you have to explain how this impacts their district. You have to put it in terms of jobs, in terms of voters, that is district specific. If you talk about, sort of grand national politics, that doesn't matter to a member of Congress from Oklahoma or Virginia or California. Like, you need to explain this is what the impact's going to be on, the 4th congressional district in Oklahoma. And so that's where I think we can help our clients, and where we do help our clients is knowing who are the right people to be talking to and what's the right message to tell them. I'm not naive enough to think that money doesn't have an influence in politics. Like, the reality is it probably does. But Sherrod Brown raised $91 million for his Senate race last year. If you think that the couple $1,000s that I donated or Rob donated to Sherrod Brown influenced and could be by his vote, as Rob would say, give me a break. Like, Sherrod, that doesn't impact Sherrod. I give him money because I like him, and I think that he was a good senator, and I want to keep him in office. But it doesn't have that kind of influence. And if it does, you're not going to be in politics for that long. Like, if your vote can be bought for that little amount of money, you're not going to be around very long. There's a great line because I'm a Democrat who grew up, in the 90s. The West Wing is obviously is critically important to me. The great line from Senator Vinnick, who's Republican running for Senate in that movie, that says, if you can't drink their booze, take their money, and then vote against them, you don't belong in this business.
That's true.
Yeah.
Such a
Brad,
good show.
A recent poll showed that lobbyists were trailing chlamydia, gonorrhea, and Al-Qaeda in public approval polls. I believe we were around 7%. Some might say we're down to friends and family. And you could argue that at least you can get rid of those other ones. It's tough to get rid of us because of the Constitution, as you know. But what do you think lobbyists could do, or should we even care, to improve our public opinion? Because we see it every day. Members of Congress go down and give floor speeches railing against lobbyists and special interests. And then they show up at our fundraisers at night, gladly accepting the checks that we collect for them. Should we care about what the public thinks about us, or wear it as a badge of honor?
Listen, I think that we just sort of have to wear the scarlet L. Like, I don't think that there's much that we can do to change people's perception of lobbying. Yeah, my dad said to me at some point when I had left Capitol Hill, it was a lot easier to explain to people when you were working for Senator Clinton what you did every day. Like, well, yeah. But I don't think it makes our jobs any less important. I sleep okay at night, and I think we play a critical role in the system.
I agree.
Because I don't want these members of Congress making these decisions uninformed. And the reality is, like, if you didn't have lobbyists working, then they're not going to get the information they need to make an informed decision.
But just like every profession, there are good lobbyists and there are bad lobbyists. There are good
100%.
campaign consultants and there are bad campaign consultants. And if I look at Oklahoma, there are some lobbyists that that building would not run without them. They provide a very key service to those members of the legislature, like you said, as a conduit of information. Especially we have term limits in Oklahoma. So a lot of these lobbyists have been around a whole hell of a lot longer than the member of the House or the Senate. And they know a lot more about the process and can be very helpful in getting meaningful legislation passed or stopping meaningful legislation from happening. So I think what you guys do is important. I would like to ask a question, though. I'm sure you have plenty of grievances to air about President Trump, just like Rob does. But on the other hand, there's people like myself that think that President Trump is just doing a fantastic job. And we could argue all day long about our differences, just like we did driving 3 hours from Streamsong down to West Palm Beach. We had some good arguments, and
We didn't have arguments. We just had debate.
Yeah, we had debate, and actually, it was really good. Rob, you would have liked it, talking about we were talking about tax policy and how different tax plans would affect different constituencies and create major impacts. And I think the guys that we're traveling with enjoyed the conversation as well. But here's what I'm getting at. You guys represent some major companies. You lobby on their behalf. And there must be times when your personal views would differ with what your client wants to see get accomplished. So, one, how do you separate what you want to get, what you would like to see done personally versus what your clients want to see objectively get done? And then also, how do lobbying firms, how do they manage conflicts of interest? If you have a client that wants a certain piece of legislation passed and another client that would want to see that piece of legislation killed.
All right, so that's a good question. The conflicts actually, in my experience doing multi-client lobbying, happen a lot less frequently than I think people would think they would. Now we're a smaller firm. We're intentionally a smaller firm. We're not, there are some firms that, have hundreds and hundreds of clients, and there they probably have to deal with conflicts a lot more. But the NRA is not going to be hiring me to lobby for them, right? Like, no, most of the time, I'm not going to get hired by a company that's going to be on the opposite side of another issue. I can think of an instance where I was having lunch with a potential client a couple years ago, and we were sort of just talking through one particular issue, and they said they're on the opposite side of a bill that was a issue that Rob worked on a lot. And I was like, oh, well, all right, that's not going to work. And that was, you sort of you deal with it at the front end. I think in terms of just conflicts in general, it's like Potter Stewart's definition of pornography. I'll know it when I see it. You just sort of, it's just kind of rare and it doesn't happen that often. And I think that most firms, if they actually do run into a situation where two existing clients are end up on the opposite side of an issue, it's sort of the last in, first out rule of, if you actually get to that point, you sort of set up that's kind of what the deciding factor is. But you also, you can deal with it. You can set up, a Chinese firewall to sort of prevent, if one lobbyist is working on this issue, like for this client, like I'm just going to do that, and you're just going to do this, and we're not going to talk about it, and you work through it.
Sure.
But it doesn't, I don't know, Rob, how often does that really solid, really difficult conflicts come up in your...
I think you hit the nail on the head with, it's rare that somebody would hire us or that we would take them on to do something that we disagree with. But over the course of representation, you run into, I would say, more strategic differences where it's very similar to being a senior staffer on Capitol Hill. We've all had a boss that decides on a different course of action, a different strategy, would vote differently than how we would like on a topic. And as long as there's not some massive moral qualm, their name's on the door or they're the person writing the check. So you carry it out the best that you can. Now, if it gets to a point to where the difference is so serious, then you got to part ways. It's just
Yeah.
it's that simple. I mean, I disagreed with Congressman Schuler on a variety of issues when I worked for him. I disagreed with his view on trade. I disagreed with some of his environmental views. I disagreed with some of his social issues. He was one of the only Democrats who was 100%, pro-life. But I reached peace with it because he's such a good dude. And I just, he knew how I felt about it. And it wasn't something that I was going to resign over. I mean, reasonable people disagree on reasonable debates. So it's no different with clients. I mean, we represented Gabrielle Giffords and worked on the background check bill. I wouldn't take on the NRA no matter what they paid me.
And they wouldn't hire you, so.
Nor would they hire me. I think more or less you run into strategic differences. Um, I don't want to name any clients by name, but like, I might lay out a case for them of what we should do. And if they disagree, well, then I either carry it out or we are done here. It's more of that in our world. You know, people think of
It might also
politics.
be sorry.
Yeah. People think of politics and like only the divisive issues, you know, abortion, guns, gay marriage, whatever the most divisive social issues are. That was really the only foray I had ever had in lobbying in one of those. I mean, typically we're arguing over whether a provision in a bill says the word shall or may, or a cap level, or, language here or there that could be worth billions of dollars. Um, we're not necessarily focusing on just what you see covered on MSNBC or Fox News that night. And frankly, 95% of what Congress does has nothing to do with those issues. And lobbyists don't matter on those issues because nobody just comes to Washington and changes their view on abortion, right? So it's like, it's not like I'm going to go in and
Well, and
lobby.
there are lobbyists for those industries. Like, the pro-life side has some lobbyists, but they're more activists to keep members informed of what they'd like to see done
Keep
on
pressure.
those issues. Yeah, you keep pressure on.
Yeah, listen, I think that sometimes politics are shades of gray. Lobbying is shades of gray. It's probably been times over the years where, whether it's lobbying in-house at MBA or for a client, where they may say that if X, Y, and Z happens, it's going to be this cataclysmic event. And I may sort of be like, is it really? But I also think it's not a good thing. So it's sort of, you kind of have to say, all right, well, I'll go along with it, that it's really bad. But you may not agree that fully it's going to do it. And I think to Rob's point too about working for members, someone, there's a saying that nobody elected to be dog catcher of anything. And I think that that's true. Like it's the member of Congress's name on the door. They're the ones who put their name on the ballot and won the seat. And the voters said that they're the ones who make the decision. As a staffer, your job is to present them with all the information so they can make an informed decision. And you have to trust their judgment. When I was 28-year-old chief of staff for Brad Sherman, in the first month that I was on the job, and he's a senior member of the Financial Services Committee, Lehman Brothers collapsed, Fannie and Freddie collapsed, Bear Stearns went under, it was, financial meltdown. And they were trying to pass the first TARP bill at the end of September. I hadn't even been on the job for 2 months, and Brad was adamantly opposed to that bill, and rallied, the opposition to it. I think that I don't think he actually thought that we were going to win the floor vote. He was just making the principled stand against it. He was really opposed to it. That bill went down, and the stock market dropped like 500 points in 20 minutes after it failed. And I remember sitting at my desk being like, we're playing with live ammo here, right? Like, this is not theoretical stuff. And so it was a good lesson of, hey, like the decisions that are made in that building have real impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. Well, I think this segment's been really impactful and interesting, hopefully for our listeners as well. I know it's interesting for me. I would like to segue into golf, though.
Sure.
Man, I've really enjoyed playing golf with you, Brad. I really
great.
enjoyed last week, and I'm really glad that came together. But let's first just, how did you get into the game of golf? What do you enjoy most about it? And, why is it such a passion for you?
So I didn't come from a golfing family. I was not like you two that, played golf from a young age. I remember first picking up golf in college, and going out to play Rock Creek Park with some of my fraternity brothers, having never really swung a golf club until, that day. And we probably shot about 150 for 9 holes. But somehow I talked my way into second semester of my senior year at American into taking, because I had to take a full credit load to be able to graduate, and had finished everything for my major, I took advanced golf. Now, there was a beginning golf course that was offered, um, but that just involved basically like chipping and putting around like some field on the campus of AU. I took advanced golf, again, having only played golf like once or twice, which involved every Wednesday morning we went and played at some local course in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And we played 18 holes, and it was taught by this crusty old golf pro. I can't remember his name, who I think probably smoked 2 packs a day and had beer for breakfast. But it was great. And he'd give us some pointers on the golf swing and kind of taught me the fundamentals of the swing. I didn't even own a set of golf clubs. I used my buddy Dave Roberts' golf clubs because he was about my height and was the only person I knew had clubs. And that's how I spent, every Wednesday morning for the second semester of my senior year. And it was great. And so that kind of got me into the game. And I say I represent the high handicap listeners on your podcast. Not everybody can be a low single digit or a plus handicap like you and Rob. There has to be some 13 handicaps around. So
I just want to make sure that you did not get an A in advanced golf, because I don't
I
want
100% got an A.
to.
It wasn't based on your score. It was based on whether you showed up to class.
I don't want to discredit American university's curriculum.
Hey, listen, the thing about it is that the way AU set up their schedule, it was like your classes Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, and then you had sort of the block classes on Wednesdays. So this was a Wednesday morning class. Tuesday night was like a big party night at AU. Like everybody would go out on Tuesday nights because most people didn't have classes or they did internships on Wednesday. So the fact that like basically the only requirement was that you showed up to class on time on Wednesday morning and you got yourself to whatever, whether it was Popic Bay or Laytonsville or, all the public courses around the area. If you just had to get yourself there by the tea time on Wednesday morning, you got an A. So
there's like a political golf circuit, and every year someone inevitably compiles a list of all the Republican and Democratic PAC events around the country. And some people strategically pick where they're going to go because they need to get to know a certain senator better or chief of staff. And then there are those like me who make this selection entirely based upon where they're playing. So I was wondering, if you could talk a little bit about how important golf is in DC life and politics, and any of your favorite memories of, golfing and politics.
yeah, so you are right. Like that's when I sort of, after I did campaigns and other stuff, when I started to really pick up the game is when I went to the mortgage bankers, and we had a political action committee that I got, I was lucky enough to be able to spend a healthy, chunk of it for Democratic senators. And I got to pick, especially the trips I'd go on. And so I'd go on the Democratic political foot trips and to golf resorts and got to play Pinehurst and Kiowa and Whistling Straits and, Marion and a bunch of really amazing courses that I otherwise would have never been exposed to but for those trips, which my wife would joke. She's like, this is exactly what people think is wrong with Washington, to your earlier conversation. But listen, I think that you guys have talked about this. Golf gives you an opportunity to spend time with someone in a relaxed environment over a 4-hour period. And you get to learn a lot about that person and their personality and their character. And there's people that after you play a round of golf with them, you're like, don't really want to do that again. And then there's people where you're like, that was really fun. Like, I want to go play with them again. And so I quickly, as I was sort of getting exposed to this world, realized I want to be one of the people that, people want to play another round of golf with. And you sort of learn what is it about the people that you don't like. I would say it's one of the earliest rules I learned in playing golf is it's okay to be a bad golfer, just don't be a bad slow golfer. And so like, I mean, we talked about this last week. I sometimes will get a little intimidated when I'm playing with guys like Rob or you or Nick, who are really, really good golfers, that like, I can't keep up with them. But then I also realized that like, hey, you weren't always, as good as you are. And as long as I'm not holding you up and like causing it to be a 6-hour round, you don't care how many golf shots I hit, as long as I keep up the pace of play. And there'll be times where, maybe too early, I pick up my ball and put it in my pocket and be like, I'm done, because I'm not going back and forth across this green, another 2 times to try and get on, be able to putt.
I want to tell Rob a story about our last golf round in Florida at the park. A moment where I was very proud of Brad. He hit a couple bad shots in a row, put it in a bunker, bladed it over the green. He's like laying 5 or 6. I mean, we've all been there in this situation. And I think that there was going through his mind is, I'm just going to pick this ball up and go to the next hole. And instead, I watched him truly compose himself from a really nippy, tight lie, hits a 60-degree wedge up onto the green about 10 feet from the hole. Didn't make the putt, but like made an unbelievable shot from down there. And I think it just showed me like, man, this guy's really working his game. He hit a really good round at the park. That was one of the few holes where he was struggling. What'd you shoot? You shot in the 80s, didn't you?
89, yeah.
89 at the park, which I thought was a heck of a round for him. And so
90 if you give me the penalty stroke for kicking my ball out from behind the cactus.
It
was in a footprint.
So Nick was your partner, and we were in a very fierce match. Like all of our matches were fierce, and he was in a footprint, and Nick's like, "Oh, just kick, get it out of the footprint." I said, "Nick, he's popping on this hole, and we're down by 1. If his score counts, that's counting as a penalty." That's what I told Nick.
Which I said to Nick, I was like, "Listen, if it matters."
Yeah. The good news is I hit the best shot of the day for me, and so did Bob Kyle, and we had 2 pars for birdies on that hole, so we were in good shape.
My favorite Brad golfing moment. We're on the 9th hole at RTJ playing with Congressman Pappas from New Hampshire, and I'm going back to the cart to grab something. Brad makes a hole-in-one, and tell him a little bit about my response, Brad.
I think the first words were, "Are you effing kidding me?" Because for the previous 8 holes, I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. But somehow and it wasn't like one of those like hole-in-ones that you hear about where like you blade it and somehow it runs up onto the green and like, into the hole. I hit a gorgeous 8-iron, and it hit the front of the green 2 hops and rolled into the hole, and we saw it go in. Like, it was the best and probably my only good shot of the day. So then Rob actually was very cool about it.
Historically, Rob Ellsworth, 0 hole-in-ones. Brad Cheney, 1 hole-in-one. That's nice. There should be some kind of plaque about that at the office, I think.
It's true. Rob does have a double eagle though, so
yeah.
Yeah, but nobody ever asks, do you have a double eagle? They always ask. It's like when you work in DC long enough and you go home like the night before Thanksgiving and you go out to the bars. The only question people ask is like, have you met the president? Like, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in golf. Like, do you have a hole-in-one? And my answer is no. Brad's is yes.
it's true. And
Okay.
listen, Rob was great. He arranged for me to get the flag. Like, after his initial like, I can't believe that he just got a hole-in-one and I don't have one. Like, he was great. The other thing about both doing it as with a congressman is that I couldn't buy his drinks.
Yeah.
And then also at RTJ, it's not like you can go into the bar there and just plop your credit card down and buy a round for everybody,
It
because
means I
they
buy
don't
it.
take credit cards. So
I
Rob
mean,
bought the round for everybody.
look, after the first minute or so of shock and general disgust, I got over myself and was congratulatory and was genuinely happy for you.
You were.
Rob, do you remember Randy Hillis from Woodview? I don't know if you ever met Randy Hillis. He was
Yeah.
the pro at Woodview, and his family started Woodview.
Yeah,
He shot 57 one time at Woodview. Like, this guy was a stick at one point in time, playing his whole life. Never had a hole-in-one, ever. And so he's probably 60 at the time, and I was 16, and I got my first one and on number 8. And I come in at the turn at number 9, and I went and showed him the scorecard. And he literally took the scorecard and just, like, I'm 16, maybe I'm 15 or 16. I'm a young kid, and I'm beaming ear to ear. He just looked at me and said the same thing that you said to Brad. You got to be effing kidding me, and walked in the back. Didn't even say congratulations, nothing. Like, he was just pissed that he'd been playing golf all those years and never had one.
Yeah. Look, you realize it's luck,
Yeah.
I've seen Rob get
Hey, you
close
still had to
to
hit the good 8-iron. My dad had 2 in 1 week when he came one time, and the first one was a pure shot. I mean, he had an unbelievable shot. The second one, he chunked it left and hit off a hillside and came down on the green and went in. It was, so there's definitely a lot of luck, but I just thought the odds of that too in a matter of 3 days is crazy.
Right.
But Rob, I want to assume that you've invited Brad to be part of the Democratic team for the GMP Cup in Maxwell, Nebraska in August. Is he a part of your team?
I invited Brad, and Brad, you can, tell the world what you told me.
I said that I would love to attend, but that my cousin is getting married the weekend before in West Virginia, and then all of my family is going to be coming to our lake house on Lake Anna that Monday of the Cup, and for the long-term, survivability of my marriage, I thought it was a better choice not to leave my wife with all of my family at the lake and go golf in Nebraska.
Well, our marriage is now in jeopardy. I was relying on those 13 strokes, and now we're gonna
Now Rob's going to go find a Republican to replace you and try to get him to change parties or something.
Listen, this summer, with Bob Kyle, I'm on Operation increase or decrease his handicap every time I play with him.
We're going to get it up. We're going to get it up. No gimmies. No gimmies to Bob
I'm giving
Kyle.
Bob. If Bob
He's not going to take him.
If Bob hits it on the green, I'm going to be like, that's good.
I'm capping Bob Kyle at Sneven. He's capped.
Man, that guy, by the way, we played a lot of matches, last week in Florida. He hits so many putts within 10 feet. I mean, it would get to the point that, we played this scramble against each other on the short course that they have at Streamsong, and Nick and I were getting so frustrated because we would put the ball on the green. We'd have looks at birdie. We couldn't buy a putt, and Matt and Bob would be hitting it all over the fucking planet, and
not exaggerating.
Somehow they would scramble from behind dunes. We
were making pars like crazy, and they couldn't make a putt.
And I just started saying, you guys get it within 10 feet. And Matt, you made putts too, but get within 10 feet, and I'm like, it's in. He's gonna make
it. From 33 feet, I think Bob came through on a 33-footer. Do you want to tell our audience about?
He did the
17th hole of that match. It literally cost you $1,000, I think.
It was not. That was not a cheap putt. I nearly rolled mine in, but yes, we were going back and forth until, I guess technically the 18th hole, because that course was 19 holes. So
it was. It was the 18th of the 19th hole. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and we had Casey and Nick and I had battled back. We'd gotten it
all the momentum on your side.
Yeah, all the momentum. And again, he put a really good swing on the ball on that long uphill par 3. You guys are off the green, right?
No. So Nick knocks it to 25 feet. Good shot for an uphill 150-yard shot. Bob Kyle goes first, straight shanks it right into the water. Now, I've been struggling with the shanks that entire trip. I mean, I'm having the worst couple rounds of my life, and I'm thinking, oh my God, Brad or Bob just shanked it in the water, and now, the match is going to be over. And we're playing for dinner. We didn't know where we were having dinner. We just knew we were playing for dinner. And somehow I got my act together and I hit a pretty good shot on the green, and we had a 33-foot putt. I putt first. I had a good line, left it 2 feet short, but Bob learned from me. Bob drains that putt. We end up going to dinner at the Breakers. Rob shows up. And so, the bill just went like this. And,
it was fun.
It was good times.
Nice shit. I gotta. So, last week you guys played Streamsong Red, Streamsong Blue, and the Park. If you each had 10 rounds to divvy up between those 3 courses, what would the breakdown be? Brad, you go first.
I'd play 5 on the Park, 3 on Red, 2 on Blue.
I would go 5 at the Park as well, but I would go 3 on Blue and 2 on Red.
Right. And if I could throw in a round at the chain, I'd do that probably.
I think I just want to have a round at the chain after every round at streams. I think you should have to play the chain in the afternoon, and it is an absolute blast.
Yeah.
Brad, what do you think is the best buddy trip that you've been on? Not the group per se, but the best the best venue for like a group of 4 to 8 guys to go, long weekend or a week-long trip? What's the Brad Cheney?
Bandon Dunes.
I've not been to
Uh,
Bandon. I'm going in September, so we'll
Yeah.
see.
If it's a guy's trip, I just think that you've got 5 of the top 100 golf courses that you can play in the U.S. there. Plus, that doesn't even include the Preserve, which is their version of the Chain. Which one of the best, most fun times I ever had in the golf course was on one of the political trips where we played the Preserve at sundown, and we paired off. They picked the lowest handicap golfer, highest handicap golfers, paired them against each other. I think we had 26 people, so 13 people teeing off. Basically what happened is the highest score in each hole, they got kicked out. And if there was a tie score, that you had to chip off on each hole. So, and it was alternate shots. So, and someone was pulling a wagon with a cooler of beer in it, and sunset's over the Pacific. The weather's perfect. It was a blast. So that would be, yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
I tell you what, Stream Song was hard to beat though too. Would you say,
Yeah.
Brad? It was. I thought it was every bit as good as advertised.
Yeah. The only reason I would put Bandon over Stream Song is that you've got the ocean, and there's something about golf on the ocean that I think is really cool. And also you do have the option at Bandon to have like cottages. They do have like the hotel, but they also have cottages.
Cottage would be nice. That's why I like the dorming network. I mean, those cottages and
Yeah.
all the dorming properties are fantastic.
I also think Bandon Dunes is the closest you can get in America to playing Scottish or Irish links golf. Like,
Yeah.
it's got the fescue fairways, everything bounces and tumbles. I mean, there's no frills. You got the sand dunes and the wispy grass and the ocean. I mean, it's sitting up on this just massive cliff. I agree with Brad. I just don't think there's, you could set up a dream trip on Long Island or in Cypress Point, but there's no way to get 8 people on all those private courses. And they're still driving in between on some of those trips, but like Bandon Dunes is just
Yeah, I mean, that trip we did to Ireland was great, but there was a lot of time in the van, right, in the bus between,
which is fun.
Yeah, which is fun, but Bandon, you don't even need a rental car. You just call the shuttle and they pick you up and take you up to Pacific or Old Mac. It's the convenience of it is great once you get there.
Well, gentlemen, this is a lot of fun, but I have another meeting to go to, and this is starting to get into Joe Rogan experience length of podcast. So
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's been fun. And Brad, I'm sorry we didn't allow you to air your grievances with Trump. We might have to have you back on the show so you can do that. But let's get into the Shotgun 9, and let's go ahead and start with the first question. You were telling me on this trip you have a great dream foursome. 1 politician, 1 pro golfer, 1 celebrity. Who's in Brad's dream foursome?
Okay, so I want to have a good time. Like, that's my goal. I want to have a round where I have a lot of laughs, have a lot of fun, and maybe learn a little something too. So my dream foursome would be, my politician would be Tip O'Neill, who still has written, hands down, I think, one of the best political autobiographies. If you haven't read it,
I have.
Recommend
Love it.
Yeah,
It's a great book.
My pro would be Lee Trevino, because I think he just would be a riot. And then rounding out at my celebrity would be Bill Murray.
Be no shortage of fun in that group.
Yeah.
Solid picks. Since you didn't get to air any grievances, what do you think is the most bullshit thing about Doge and taking a sledgehammer to these DC federal, nameless, faceless federal bureaucrats? Take as much time as you need.
Oh, yeah.
The most bullshit thing about Doge is that it's saving the taxpayers money, because it's not right now. Like, the money's not going back to the taxpayer. It's just going to the treasury. It's already appropriated money. I think the other thing that everybody loves to, when they think of the nameless, faceless bureaucrats, they think that it's everybody who lives in the swamp, right? The deep state's all the swamp. The reality is that 85% of the federal workforce live and work outside of Washington, D.C. and the D.C. metropolitan area. And the impact that these cuts are going to have are going to be much more felt in, frankly, rural Republican districts across the country than they are in D.C. Only 8% of the workforce work for the federal government in Washington, D.C., D.C. metropolitan area. That doesn't include, obviously, contractors, but like when you start to look at, districts across the country, the downstream impact of these cuts are going to be huge because there's not other jobs that people are going to be able to go to. My cousin, I think we talked about this last week. My cousin lives in Elkins, West Virginia. She named 6 federal workers in a 2-block radius of their house. Half of them had lost their jobs. These weren't people who were, teleworkers who'd come out from D.C. during COVID. These are people who work for the Forest Service in Elkins, West Virginia. What's the impact going to be of those people, on those people? You know what congressional district, Matt, has the highest number of federal workers outside of Washington, D.C.?
West Virginia, too, probably.
Oklahoma 4.
Oklahoma 4. Well, Oklahoma 4 is military bases.
These are non-military.
Non-military?
Yeah.
Oklahoma
Oklahoma 4.
because there's so many.
28,000 people work for the federal government in the Oklahoma 4th Congressional District. Second is Alabama 2.
Okay.
So, when you start to think about the downstream impacts of those cuts, it's going to be huge.
I've made my points known on this. Like, we're going to see how this all plays out. We're 6 weeks in. So,
well, Rob just teed it up for me.
He did. Of course he did. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and ask one this way. Can you name one good thing that President Trump has done since taking office?
I can.
Okay.
He has effectively
Plastic straws.
Plastic straws. No, this is what I would give President Trump credit for. He is effectively, returned to using the bully pulpit of the presidency to drive the media narrative in a way that President Biden did not do. So I give him credit for that. May think what he's saying is bullshit, but he's using the bully pulpit of the presidency effectively.
He didn't struggle there. That's
on Friday or Thursday, during the infamous showdown in the Oval Office with President Zelensky and President Trump and J.D. Vance and Lil Marco Rubio curling up there on the sofa. What was your take on that interaction?
This is not your father's Republican Party anymore. Like I don't know what happened to the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush and Richard Nixon. That was my thing. And also just watching Marco Rubio, so uncomfortable.
I think Rubio's been fantastic in his media interviews, and he's doing a great job of carrying the message. And I can tell you this, I've never been more proud of our president and vice president for standing their ground. And I think we could probably have a whole podcast about that, because I think there's just such wildly different viewpoints on how that meeting went in this country. That's fascinating. Because I guarantee we have 180-degree differences on the issue. But anyway, it was a fascinating day on Friday. That's for sure.
Matt, do you think Russia invaded Ukraine, or did Ukraine invade?
Yes, Russia invaded Ukraine. No question about it.
Was there any?
That has nothing to do with what happened in the Oval Office on Friday. What happened in the Oval Office on Friday is President Trump had a plan that was going to accomplish peace, and Zelensky blew the opportunity for it. And so now if Europe's going to pay for it, then Europe's going to pay for it. That's fine. But it's just going to perpetuate a war that's never going to get won.
Zelensky is the president of his country that's been in a 3-year war that was
because of martial law and his own declaration that he's president. That
was supposed to last 3 days. And us telling him what the terms for his surrender to the dictator that frankly can't win the war on his own, Putin, is a bit rich and absurd. But I do admire how you've turned into Baghdad Bob on the Trump. Everything's beautiful. Everything's great. Never been more proud. No mistakes. This is just terrific. Give me a break.
Here's a genuine question that I'll ask you. And this is so outside of Shotgun 9 type of questions, but we'll go here. I just want to genuinely, how much should the United States of America pay, and for how long should we continue to pay to keep Ukraine going in this war?
Way more than we've done. The president
Okay.
the president lied and said that we've put in $350 billion, and that's more than Europe. The real number is around 120 billion, and of that 120 billion, 80 billion went to US manufacturers so that we could send all of our old supplies to Ukraine and replenish them for our own use for whatever we need to use it for down the road. So, in that 120 billion, only 40 billion went directly to Ukraine for aid, and Europe has put in way more than that, and Europe has faced the brunt of much higher prices on energy, on everything than we are. Their inflation has been way worse, and they want to continue pushing this forward. And strategically, from our interests, we'd be stupid not to. I'd put in another 120 billion without batting an eye. And the reason is Ukraine is putting up our fight and draining Russia. They've lost 800 to 900,000 men in this war that they started for no reason, without attack. And we've got Russia on the ropes. Their currency is worth nothing. Their markets are in the ground. They've lost 800 to 900,000 soldiers. They've proven to the world that they're a paper tiger. They should have won this. Everyone thought they had won this thing in 3 days or 3 weeks, and it's gone on for 3 years. And we've been able to do this while replenishing our entire military supplies with domestic manufacturers. We would be idiots to stop and to just hand Putin back, hand him something he does not deserve, he has not won, is not just. And Marco Rubio knows better.
But it wasn't handing Russia a victory. What it was doing was setting up a strategic alliance where we're going to do business in Ukraine as the United States, because the money that we have given to Ukraine was not a loan.
Turn off the
Like
Fox
all of
and
Europe's money has been a loan to Ukraine.
That's nonsense.
And
It's
here's
not-
the thing:
it-
Russia would
President-
not be attacking Ukraine
President-
if we were there doing
President
business.
Macron corrected Trump in the Oval Office, and Trump didn't berate him. President Macron put his hand on him and said, no, these are not loans. It's direct aid. It's what we did in the Marshall Plan. The reason why we don't do loans is the same reason why the Republican Congress in the 1920s, look up the history, the know-nothing, do-nothing Congress of the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, the Republicans pressed the Weimar Republic in Germany to repay their World War I debts back way too fast. They went to the printing press. They had rampant inflation. The Weimar Republic collapsed. And in our retreat of the isolationist 1920s Republicans, we saw the rise of Hitler, and we ended up in World War II. So this is nothing new. The 2020s Republicans, it's the same shit as the 1920s. Remember the Smoot-Hawley tariffs that led to a financial collapse in Great Depression? We were restrictionists on immigration. We were restrictionists on trade. We were isolationists on the world community. We tried to do everything through tariffs because we had very low income taxes. And we ended up in a Great Depression, a world war, and the rise of a fascist dictator. So, history doesn't fully repeat itself, but let's look at the parallels there. It's very striking. The United States cannot retreat as being a world leader. I'm not saying we have to fight every war. We're not fighting this war ourselves. We're sending our old equipment and aid to a democratic ally to fight off ruthless aggression from a butcher, from a fucking butcher. So the idea that he stands in there and Hegseth says, I'm not sure who invaded who. It's unclear. It's gray. It's complicated. No, it's not. He was on Fox News every single week for the first 2 years before it became popular to jerk off Vladimir Putin. And he was saying, on screens that said the invasion of Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and condemning it. And now all of a sudden to be in Trump's good graces, oh, Ukraine bad, Russia good. You know why Trump hates Ukraine? He hates Ukraine because he first tried to pressure
I don't
them.
think. Wait, where are you getting this? He hates Ukraine. Like, he doesn't hate Ukraine.
No. Do your homework. He first,
uh,
when he was president in 2017, he pressured Ukraine to take the blame for the Russian interference in the election. Now, you can argue whether or not there was direct collusion with Trump, but there was direct intervention by Russian agencies. Okay. He tried to blame that on Ukraine. Ukraine said, no, it wasn't us. And it was because of Paul Manafort's relationship representing the former dictator of Ukraine and his strong relationships with Russia. Then, fast forward 3 years, Trump was told that Zelensky had dirt on the Bidens. He pressured them and withheld congressionally appropriated 500 million in congressionally appropriated funds for Ukraine while Russia was on Ukraine's doorstep, and Trump withheld it, got impeached over it. He has had it in for Ukraine and Zelensky for 8 years for personal political reasons, and he has some weird fascination with Vladimir Putin. Like, I don't know what the fascination is, but it's there. I'll let Brad jump in. Brad, you jump in.
No, I mean, listen, I agree with everything Rob said. This is my overarching thing, is that I wish that somebody could explain to me what the actual strategy is, like, of the Trump administration. Like, what is our long-term goal here with our relationship with Russia, with what's going on with Ukraine? Because the best that I can come up with is, to Rob's point, he doesn't like Ukraine. And there's a lot of basically when Trump did this the first term and he's doing it now, of trying to basically erase everything that his predecessor did. And I just sort of feel like if Joe Biden was supportive of Ukraine, Trump instinctively said, "Oh, I'm opposed to it." I just don't know what the long-term strategic plan is for our relationship.
I mean, I
with Europe
think
in
the strategic, the long-term strategic plan is for this to end. I mean, there's tens and tens of thousands of people dying, and it needs to come to an end. But
yeah,
we also need to take an end to this podcast because we're going way long. So, any more last fun questions that we want to end with? We know where we disagree. Rob, do you have any more Shotgun 9 questions for Brad?
Yes, there's a preamble to it.
Okay.
I would like to say that I think Republicans have this weird daddy issue where they saw Vladimir Putin riding a horse shirtless and criticizing Barack Obama. And they're like, oh, he's tough. I like him. It's the same thing with Donald Trump, only God forbid.
Here we go.
He'd kill a
All
horse if he got on top of it. But Brad, I just wanted to ask one more question now that we've established their daddy issues and jock sniffing. Um, what are 5 courses you've not played that you would like to play?
Okay. Cabot Cliffs, because I played both of them because the same people as that did Bandon. Obviously Augusta's top of the list. I'd like to play Sandhills because that one has sort of started off kind of this destination golf.
Maybe come to Nebraska, Rob.
I know.
Yeah, I was
know.
just thinking the same thing. You could have got on Sam Hills if you weren't going to a family reunion.
Shinnecock would be another one. And I would want to play the old course in reverse. I played the old course regularly, but to play it backwards would be. They do that once a year, I think, right? So
That's great.
yeah.
All right, last question. What's the number one thing that Rob Ellsworth does that annoys you?
Rob hits the golf ball about the same distance that I do. If we're playing on the same tee boxes, we drive the ball about the same. Maybe you might be 10 yards, 20 yards, depending on the hole, longer than me. We usually hit about the same yardage on par 3s, and he shoots 20 to 30 strokes less than I do in a round of golf. Because
it's tremendous. It's the best ever. He
is maddeningly consistent with his golf swing.
I appreciate that, but you just answered it like an interview question when you say, "What is my greatest weakness?" And the response is, "It's that I tried. It's that I worked really hard." But I'll take it. That could have been much worse.
No, yeah. Rob's a good guy, and he's been a good friend and a good business partner. So
I was looking for a little jab, a little dig, something, and I got, he's just an amazing golfer. He's the best golfer. Beats me by 30 shots.
Yeah, but it's not that he's an amazing golfer. Listen, if I get when I play with you and with Nick, like, I can't hit my 3-wood 300 yards like you can. Like, now granted, you don't always hit it straight, or where you're aiming, but you hit your three with, Nick hits these, hits his gap wedge 135 yards, that go so far up in the air. It's a game that I'm like, oh, well, that's why he's so good. I play with Rob and I'm like, I can hit all of the same shots that he hits. And it's so aggravating because he does it on every hole so consistently and shoots so much better than me. That's what's so frustrating about it. It's like, I should be able to do that, but I can't because
that used to be the thing that annoyed me about Rob the most. Now the new thing that annoys me about Rob the most is he brings up detailed debate questions in the Shotgun 9. It's not the format for the Shotgun 9, but it's all good. It's all good.
Leave it to MAGA to long for a return to decorum and normal. I'm just shaking things up here. I'm just shaking,
Well,
fair.
I hope. What are we at here? Hour and 31 minutes. I'm late for my meeting.
I'm late for mine.
I had an absolute blast. I hope our listeners have fun listening. If you're still listening to us, and Brad, thanks for coming on the show. Rob, thanks for making this happen today. And I just want to thank everybody that does listen. Please follow us and subscribe anywhere that you get podcasts. We're on every single platform. We're on every single social media platform. Please follow us and subscribe. It definitely helps us to build a bigger audience and to get this information out to more people. So, Brad, thanks again. Rob, I will see you guys real soon, and thanks again.
Thank you.